Hi friends, I'm Andy Green, and today I'm talking about dreams, about baseball, and mostly about my best friend from childhood, John Marsh, because this is the Naked Man Podcast. I knew it was a dream, and he wasn't real. I knew it was a dream when Bandit, the border collie of my youth, dropped a mangled, chewed-up frisbee at my feet. He and his piercing bark was the avatar of my dreams, the alarm bell within the dream elevating me to a different level of consciousness. In some sense, I had awoken now. Lucid, yet I remained ensconced in the hazy front yard of my childhood, my old house, my first house. The one with the rough concrete steps where I skinned my shin, the side yard where I discovered one of my sister's chickens hanging from the waterlogged fence, dead, and the terrible black carpet in my bedroom upon which my toys had their adventures was all long behind me. I knew this wasn't real, that he wasn't real, but still, I played. I didn't want to go back to reality, to adulthood, not yet. 5 more minutes, I yelled, as if my parents had called us in for dinner. Because I was playing with John Marsh. I hadn't played with John Marsh for years. Who knew when I would get another chance? If I would get another chance. I was now 32 and 12 at the same time. We had just gotten back from the Ballard Boys and Girls baseball camp, yet we still wanted to keep playing. We never got tired of baseball. At least, I didn't, and he played along, as he always did. And besides, today, right now, this was All-Star Weekend, my favorite time of every season. It was always All-Star Weekend when we played, and I was announcing our starting lineups, batting away Bandit from our heels. Whenever I woke up, I knew it would be time for work, not time for All-Stars. This might be our last All-Star game. I knew all this, but John Marsh didn't. He was busy folding our old crew socks into sock baseballs, the only equipment needed for our little tournament. He was always better at folding than I was. Especially now, I imagined. He had enlisted in the Army. He had moved to North Carolina. He had gotten married. He had never told me why. Why would John Marsh give this up? The rotting zip line amid the cedars that wasn't mine, the gnarly blackberry bushes that were like the dread vines in Sleeping Beauty. But no, we had removed those years ago. I realized then we had rarely played sock baseball at this house. We mostly did it when we were older, when we were too old for such games but did so anyway, the tamest and lamest and greatest of rebellions. John Marsh had even broken my sister's bedroom window, trying to throw me out at first base, which was simply a clump of grass I had mowed improperly. We were too old for this ride, but we rode it anyway. We had mostly played sock baseball at my next house, the one with the hot tub, but that was the house where I ceased being a kid. That house still existed. It was stained by reality. That house was where I went to high school, where I learned depression, where I skirted responsibility and felt like a failure, where my mom picked me up off the hardwood floor because I was passed out drunk. That was where my childhood and adulthood declared war against each other, the battle that never ends. But this house, the one with the never-ending driveway, the perfect hill for sledding that one time it snowed, this house was magic. There were spirits here. My mom would talk to them, to a ball of light in the corner of their bedroom when she was in that sweet nexus between sleep and awake, maybe in the same state I was in right now. My dad would dance to Peter Gabriel and Celine Dion with us and swing his adult bat, indoors, to Conan the Barbarian's bombastic score. When Conan was on, lamps, fans, and all furniture became mere obstacles in the search for the perfect swing that would make Steve Garvey proud. My sister would sleepwalk, perhaps controlled by the woman who had overdosed on heroin in the house before we had moved there. I would dream so big that nothing else mattered, so big that I could still visit it even now. The stadium where I'd played endless seasons of Mariners baseball in my head to an adoring crowd of 1, or sometimes 2. John Marsh is always 12 here, riddled with freckles and a smirk. He was deathly afraid of dogs, I remembered suddenly, and panicked. I always hated when he whimpered and shielded his face from Bandit, from any dog, even the stupid small ones. I'd hated this weakness. Hated when he had been brave enough to show fear. But not now. Now John Marsh was calm, determined, at the plate, batting left-handed. He had taught himself to switch hit, a notion that still made me twinge with jealousy 20 years later. There were now 2 on, 2 outs. He had been making a comeback. He always did. I had to make it interesting, didn't I? Maybe this would be the first time he'd win. I'd never lost because I never let him win. Was that why he moved away? Was that why he joined the army? Why he married a stranger and didn't invite me to the wedding? Why I didn't know if he was alive or dead, if he had survived? I considered letting him win now. I could easily tank this all-star game and bring in my least favorite closer, Heathcliff Slocum. I could groove a fast softball right in there for John Marsh, which he'd surely bop into the blackberry bushes with his bare hand for a 3-run jack, a blown save and the end of a lifelong winning streak. John Marsh wiggled his hands behind his ear, exaggerated, eye black smeared all over his face, his messy strawberry blonde hair covered not by a baseball cap, but an old-fashioned army helmet. No, I couldn't let him win. Besides, I knew what he was thinking. So I voiced it. Bagel bites after this? He stopped suddenly, incredulous. How did you know? How did you know I was thinking the exact same thing? I shrugged. You're always thinking bagel bites. Or maybe that was me. I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't tell him that this was my dream, that he wasn't real, that none of this was real, that he was a puppet, that I controlled him. Maybe I always had. I couldn't tell John Marsh that we hadn't seen each other in 15 years, maybe longer. I had lost track. We had lost track of each other. I couldn't tell John Marsh that we hadn't played sock baseball for even longer. I couldn't tell myself. I couldn't tell myself that this was the highlight of my sporting career, what I longed for but couldn't reach in front of a real grandstand, what I chased when I was introduced to drinking games in college. This was heaven. Right here in the backyard, dreaming, playing with my favorite best friend, playing as every player on the Seattle Mariners 1995 through 1997 rosters, saving all of my home runs for Jay Buhner. Anyone but myself. I was always better when I wasn't myself. If I told John that he wasn't real, that this wasn't real, it would all go away. I was sure of it. I'd wake up, Bandit would be dead, John Marsh may as well be. No All-Star weekend in sight. No. I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell anybody. This was my dream and nobody else's. Then I winced, feeling a tingly pain from my knee, the eternal baseball wound that reopened whenever I slid, even today during co-ed softball, even out there, even as an adult. I took this phantom pain as a message from the baseball gods. I shook off the sign from the imaginary catcher behind the plot of dirt where grass had ceased to grow due to our plastic cleats. It was time for a pitching change. I got set and changed my grip to a Heathcliff Slocum fastball. You know, it might be fun to let someone else win for a change. Maybe then he wouldn't leave. Maybe then we could keep playing baseball. Maybe then I wouldn't have to wake up and remember this game had ended. Maybe then I wouldn't have to wake up and remember that this game had ended 20 years ago. Just like our friendship. I'm so grateful to you all for joining me and listening. This is the last Naked Manologue of the first season of the Naked Man podcast. In 2 weeks, we're coming at you with our season finale. You might be thinking, why am I making our 19th episode so special? Well, it's Jay Buhner's jersey number, of course. In the meantime, please subscribe and rate this podcast 5 golden stars on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tell a friend about us and follow me at Wandering Green and the show at Naked Man Pod on Instagram, and don't hesitate to reach out to us at nakedmanpod@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts or feelings you'd like to share, perhaps about your best friend, call and leave a message at the Naked Man phone line at 747-231-7120. Next time on the Naked Man podcast, I bring to you a session with my therapist. In the meantime, as my dad always says, be sweet. This episode of the Naked Man podcast was conceived by Andy Green. The Naked Man is a podcast hosted, created, and produced by me, Andy Green. All music was composed by Robert Panico, and all graphics were created by Christopher Miles.